Cheese. All right, and welcome back to That's Some Cheese, part of the Vendetta Sports Podcast Network. Today is September 28th. That is a Tuesday. Courtney, what's going on? How are you? Anything
I'm
interesting
good.
from you today?
No, I just been up um doing some vendetta stuff. So,
What have you been doing?
I was editing a video, sorry,
What video?
for the new college basketball podcast.
Oh, okay. You were doing that video. Interesting. Okay.
hmm
All right. So we're gonna do the company stuff now. Just me and Courtney. That is the plan. And then we will have young Andrew, our hockey guy, come on the second half of the show. Should be interesting as hockey season kind of gets going a little bit here. Not too much from the company stuff this week. Not really, anyway. There was a two-person survivor, and only 3 people showed up to the voting. So that was interesting. Jeremy, Rinaldi, and Cam Moose were on the list for the same exact reasons. They signed up for things and then just did not do them. Kind of went over it on Survivor, but Courtney, did you have anything interesting that should be talked about on there?
Um, so did he did he hit you up after like the whole Survivor thing, Jeremy?
No, I haven't heard from him. I have not
Oh,
heard from Jeremy at all.
okay.
Yeah.
I see Cam did some stuff, so
Yeah,
put a little fear
funny, he
into
is
him.
now signed up for one blog a week, which is
Okay.
the same amount of work that I asked Jeremy to do. So that's interesting.
Well, let's see. Hopefully it's not a part two for him,
Yeah, we'll
but
see. We'll see. I don't have a ton on it. I try not to be biased in any of these Survivor videos. I just
yeah.
want to lay out the facts, see who people vote for, and call it a day.
hmm As you should.
Yeah. The posting this week has gotten better.
Yeah, that's
That's
good
for
because
sure.
we were under a little dry spell for like 2 weeks. It was a little
I,
dry,
I don't
but
know. Every time it gets into war mode around here, people just start cranking out posts. It's funny.
it is funny, but it is good. But it's like a bunch of like colleges basketball is about to happen, and then we're on football season for NFL and college, so it's a lot to write about. But
I should have mentioned this too. I have a new background just for this week. I am in I'm in Maryland, so not the normal home background right now. Should have mentioned that in the beginning.
yeah, I peeped the zebra. That just reminded me of a TikTok video. The zebra, the zebra picture.
Yeah, this is where all the Vendetta shirts get made. So
Oh, really?
yeah,
Okay. All
I'm
right.
picking up my
Cool.
Big Unk merch right before I go to Vegas. It'll be good. I don't have access to a gym for a week though, so we're losing progress. But I don't think it'll matter. I think we're
Yeah,
okay.
no. Just do you some push-ups or something.
Yeah.
That'll be good enough.
We got also we have to talk about Garrett's little video. I didn't technically see it at the time, but it was funny because we were actually messaging each other, and you called me ruthless as hell. You did.
When?
Yes, you did.
When?
That same day Garrett put the video out.
Oh,
You called me
oh
ruthless
yeah.
as hell. And then I see this video, it's like, wow, maybe I'm like misunderstood, you know?
Yeah. See? Perfect word for you.
How did you feel about Garrett's little video? I put out a blog. I'll clip it in the post or whatever. But I don't know. Maybe I didn't like fully tear up, but it was a little bit of a tear up.
It was like super unexpected because it was literally like a huge shift because we were like talking about anime, but then like Alex was like, any last words? And then Garrett said that, and I was like, oh, okay. But I think it came at the right time too, especially with like that day. It was a lot going on with like the interns, and then it was like a little Survivor about to happen. So
Yeah.
it was kind of like a perfect timing type of thing. But I think it was nice. I think it I think it had to be said because yeah,
We also have to talk about Courtney news because now Courtney is moving from fantasy to Jimmer Range.
yeah.
So, did you like being a part of Jimmer Range? What are you happy with it? Or your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I'm
Anything?
happy with it. I think definitely it'll be a good show because they really do know their stuff. So if you haven't watched it yet, the third episode just dropped. I'll plug that in there today, like 30 minutes ago. So check it out because it's something new to Vendetta, and college season is approaching. So
I like it a lot. I like
hmm
that show a lot, especially because I watched it. It was like I can't imagine that. Like, are there a lot of college basketball podcasts out there? Because like I felt like I learned things.
yeah,
I can't. I don't know where I would learn that kind of information. Like, where
right.
else would I get the information they're talking about? I don't even know where they're coming up with the shit they're talking about.
See, that's good. It's new and refreshing.
Yeah.
So it's a good addition.
All right, so we're gonna bring in young Andrew here. He's our hockey expert here at Vendetta. We'll do a little bit of a preview to the season. I don't know if we can start anywhere other than the Flyers because I mainly want I mainly want to know what kind of Andrew we're getting the whole year. Are we gonna have a sad Andrew, a happy Andrew? Like what? Because the Flyers should dictate your mood when it comes to the year.
I mean, yeah. I mean, hopefully the Phillies are dictating my mood for at least the next couple weeks because that would mean good things happen. But in terms of the Flyers, I definitely think the Flyers will be better this year than last year. I mean, last year was just an absolute perfect storm, Murphy's Law, whatever you want to call it. Basically, every single young player on the roster regressed except for Trey's fantasy hero, Joel Farabee.
Yes.
Carter Hart, chief among them, of course, with just a horrid 8.77 save percentage. They lost Matt Niskanen last offseason, and they really felt his loss all year in the offseason. Ivan Provorov really struggled on that top pair without a steady partner like Niskanen, who he had in 2019-20. And the trickle-down effect really went to the entire defensive core. I mean, team defense was a huge issue last year for the Flyers. They definitely addressed that Matt Niskanen void by getting Ryan Ellis from Nashville. He's one of the game's most underrated defensemen, right-handed guy, skates well, moves the puck. Had a pretty solid season last year, even with a broken knuckle. So if he's back to full health this year, that top pair should be dynamite. That'll make life easier for Carter Hart, and the Flyers hopefully can improve from there on out.
My question is, how much better are they really going to be? Because the defense was so bad last year. I know Ryan Ellis comes in, but is one guy really going to make that big of a difference? And now the second goalie is Martin Jones.
Yeah, the Martin Jones signing, I got to be honest, I'm not thrilled with that. The one intriguing part of that signing is that the Flyers goalie coach is Kim Dillabaugh, and Dillabaugh was Jones' goalie coach when Jones was an up-and-comer in LA. And if you remember, Jones was pretty solid as a backup for the Kings. He was their backup when they won the Cup in 2014. He took the Sharks to a final in 2016. He's capable of being a good goaltender. He just plain and simply hasn't been that for the last 3 years. So if Dillabaugh can get out of him what he got out of him earlier in his career, setting him on track for his greatest period of success, then he and Hart could be a good tandem. But obviously that's a big question mark. And obviously Ellis isn't the only new face in the defense either. Now I'm far more skeptical on his underlying numbers in Buffalo. They have been absolutely horrible throughout his entire career. And a lot of people would say that, well, aren't everyone's underlying numbers in Buffalo horrible? That is true. However, they're generally worse with Ristolainen on the ice than when he's off the ice. And obviously, Ristolainen still has played very well in Buffalo. Now, he's obviously not. He's going to be playing with a different partner in Travis Sanheim this year. That Ristolainen will definitely bring more physicality to that pairing, but I'm concerned that defensively in their own zone, I feel like that could be a mess because both Ristolainen and Sanheim are pretty aggressive defenders. So if they get out of position, there's no one back to support them. But I definitely think Ristolainen will be better than he was in Buffalo. Can he be a legitimately good top four defenseman? That remains to be seen. And obviously they brought in Keith Yandel for the third pair. Still a good offensive defenseman. He'll be competing with top prospect Cam York for that third pair lefty spot, alongside Justin Braun and Train.
Can you really trust Yandel, though? He's a healthy scratch at last playoffs.
I mean, obviously he's not the player he once was, but he still is a very good power play quarterback. And the Flyers' power play last year is 18th in the league, but anyone who watched the Flyers last year would tell you that they would have probably, if you would watch all the Flyers power plays last year and guess where they were in the league, I think most people would have said like 25th, 26th. It visually did not look very good. Now you have guys like Ellis, Ristolainen, and Yandel. All three of those guys have experience running a power play. And based on the early preseason combination, it seems like Ellis and Yandel are going to get power play time right out of the gate.
So people are sick of Provorov handling the puck at the blue line?
Yeah, I mean, he's still apparently going to be on the second pair, it seems like, based on the lines have been running in camp, which I don't agree with personally. I mean, he did score 7 power play goals in 2019-20, which was tied for first among all defensemen. But I feel like a lot of that was just driven by, like, shooting luck. I mean, he's got a good shot, don't get me wrong, but in terms of being an actually good power play quarterback and moving the puck around like you need to succeed on there, he's definitely struggled. And keep-ins have been a major issue for him over his career on the power play as well.
Now that we're in like season 2 of this thing, am I finally going to be respected as one of like the main hockey people here? Because I feel like now, like at this point, I should know some things, at least more than like Jackson.
We're gonna have to find out this year. It's gonna depend on how your takes age this year. So we'll see. I mean, you did a pretty solid first year. Obviously, got the fantasy championship. So
yeah,
you're off to a good start. Time will tell if this is like more of an Austin Matthews or Connor McDavid trek or a Shane Gostisbehere where you're kind of up and
down. We're doing that again this year, so we'll see how that goes. Speaking of, I guess we'll do this. Speaking of fantasy, give me like maybe 2 or 3 young guys that like you think will be like make a leap that I should maybe think about picking.
I'm assuming this is an entire league question and not just the Flyers.
Yeah, any league. Yeah, I mean the whole league.
Yeah,
the whole league.
Any team.
Yeah.
If you look at the Ottawa Senators, they have a ton of young guys on their team. Drake Batherson led the team in scoring. He got a nice extension over the offseason. But the guy I'd probably look at is Josh Norris. He was one of the pieces they got back in the Erik Karlsson trade a couple years ago. Obviously, a lot of their success is going to depend on if they can get Brady Tkachuk signed. But right now,
I love that dude.
Brady Tkachuk, I mean, he's a feisty player, no doubt. Fun fact, he scored his first 2 goals in the NHL against the Flyers. But Norris last year was very good. He had 17 goals and 35 points in 56 games. He should get the early audition to be Ottawa's first-line center. If he's played alongside Tkachuk and Batherson or a guy like Tim Stützle takes a step forward, he's someone that could definitely produce.
But do you think the Senators will be good? Because half the battle is you get the same amount of points for the assists.
That's true. I mean, Batherson did also have 18 assists last year. I think they'll be better than last year. I mean, if you look at the Senators, personally, I'm skeptical about the whole. I know, I think it was Dorian who said that the rebuild is over, and I got to be honest, I'm kind of skeptical about that, just because they have some really good young players, but the lack of veteran support for those guys, especially on defense, where it's basically just Thomas Chabot and a bunch of like random kids in a trench coat. So I'm skeptical the Senators will be a great team, but I think they'll score a lot of goals. I also think they'll give up a lot of goals, especially if Matt Murray doesn't take a big step forward or a step back, I guess, to where he was in Pittsburgh this year. But I mean, somebody's got to score for them. Somebody's got to score for everybody. And so I think Norris is a guy who could do that. Another guy I would keep an eye on, perhaps, is Alex Newhook in Colorado. I mean, they were just a possession juggernaut last year, scored so many goals. He could very well be their third-line center, maybe playing with like Valerie Nichushkin. I think Tyson Jost has mostly played center for them. He might move to the wing this year. Just be looking at Colorado's center depth, obviously they had McKinnon and Kadri down the middle, and Newhook was pretty productive for them at the end of the year. So I would imagine he's going to be their third-line center. And I don't know if this guy is probably not going to make the NHL out of camp, just looking at his depth or his team's depth, but maybe someone to keep an eye on moving forward is Peyton Krebs in Vegas, just because obviously Vegas is such a good team. If Krebs can find a spot on their third line, or if there's an injury, I mean, it's going to be tough for him to even crack the lineup, especially when Alex Puck comes back in a couple months from injury. But that's another guy who obviously former first-round pick, has tons of potential. And of course, Trevor Zegras in Anaheim too. But I mean, he's not really under the radar anymore. Top prospect, shined at World Juniors, was great in a brief NHL stint last year. So, I mean, he's more of a guy I think more people would know than the sleeper league from those other guys.
Give me a team that was kind of bad last year that you think will be maybe more competitive. This might be a terrible call, but at some point, don't the Devils have to turn the corner here eventually?
I mean, at some point, yes. I mean, personally, I don't think it's going to be this year for New Jersey.
Yeah.
They definitely had one of the best off seasons of any NHL team, but the Metropolitan Division is an absolute nightmare this year. Basically, every other team except Columbus has a pretty legitimate chance at making the playoffs. The issue I have with the Devils right now is on the wing. They really just don't have anybody that's above average, I would say. I like the Tomas Tatar signing. I know guys like Yanni Kolkinen and Yegor Sharangovich were solid in their rookie seasons, put up some points, but that's kind of what I was going back to talking about earlier with like North and Ottawa. Somebody had to score for the Devils last year. It just happened to be those guys. Is that sustainable? Maybe, but obviously the sample size is small for those guys. It's just like one shortened season under the belt. I definitely think New Jersey is a team on the up and up. I think next year the Devils could really make some noise, especially getting PK Subban's $9 million off the books.
Yes, he needs to go.
Being able to invest that in some help at the wing or even a better defender or whatnot, that would be huge for them.
Can't the Hughesy kid start scoring a lot here?
Who?
Hughes, Jack Hughes.
Oh, yeah. Jack Hughes is going to have a great year. I'm convinced of that, which I don't like saying as a Flyers fan, but I mean, he was pretty good. He was definitely better last year. He's getting stronger. He's someone I think is going to be huge for them this season. And especially moving forward, if he gets some really good wingers to play with, he could be even better. But I mean, he's going to have a great year for them. But I just don't think the Devils are quite ready just yet. I think next year is their year to take a big step forward. But in terms of teams who missed the playoffs last year, I wouldn't say the team was necessarily bad last year. They kind of had the same thing as the Flyers with the whole Murphy's Law thing. I really like how the Dallas Stars look. Their top 9 is very strong. They're going to have Tyler Seguin back. They're going to have Alexander Radulov back. Jason Robertson darn near stole the Calder from Kirill Kaprizov last year.
That guy saved me in fantasy.
Their top 9's pretty good. They have Denis Gurianov, who scored 20 goals in 2019-20. I think even missed some games that year. Playing on their third line right now. They did lose Jamie Alexiak, which is a big loss. I think Ryan Suter can fill his void at least in the this coming season. That 4-year contract could get a little sketchy by the end. And they have 4 quality goalie options in Ben Bishop, Anton Hudobin, Braden Holtby, and Jay Ottinger. You got to figure one of them is going to play pretty well this year. I mean, when you have that many options in the law of averages stage, you're bound to hit on at least one of them. And Ottinger was pretty good as a rookie last year. So, and of course, Bishop, before getting hurt in the bubble and whatnot, was a Vezina finalist in 2018-19 and good again in 2019-20. So I think the Dallas Stars are a team that looks really deep to me. And they're going to get goaltending, I think, this season. And hopefully all of their good players don't get injured this year and they don't have a COVID outbreak and there's not a snowstorm that causes them to spend games in Texas. So I think they'll be a much better team this year.
I watched a lot of Dallas Stars last year. I couldn't believe how good Rope Hintz was, too. That guy was just on fire every single game.
Thank you for reminding me. And he was hurt like all of last year. Like, he was playing very seriously hurt from what I've heard.
They had him on the NBA minutes restriction thing.
And he was still like a point per game player. Is he healthy this year? And he's playing with like Robertson and Pavel. Pavelski honestly could have won the Selkie last year. He was another guy. Didn't have the best first regular season in Dallas the year before last, but he was phenomenal for them last year. I mean, their top 6, Ben, Seguin, Radulov, Robertson, Hintz, Pavelski, however you want to jumble those guys around, that's legit right there. And I mean, we saw what they did, not even at full health in 2019-20, making the final in the bubble. So I think the Stars are going to be really good this year.
All right, give me your pick for team that was, I guess, really good or made the playoffs that you think will take a major step back. Mine would be Pittsburgh. Sorry, all the Tanimals, but with the way Malkin's hurt and the way Crosby's hurt, they get off to a slow start. Maybe they just blow things up.
That's definitely true. I mean, I don't know if they would blow things up because they know they're going to get those guys back, but obviously a slow start is definitely what you're worried about with those guys because the injuries to Crosby and Malkin, like you mentioned. I mean, first-line center Jeff Carter was great 10 years ago for the Flyers. I don't know if it's such a good idea.
He was hot at the end of the year.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, Teddy Bluger is another guy who got burned last year, but again, not really a top 6 guy.
They lose Tanev in the expansion. I guess he's more of a locker room guy, but...
Yeah, and they also lose Jared McCann, too, who they traded to Toronto because they thought they were going to lose in the expansion draft while they protected 37-year-old Jeff Carter. So, not really sure about that move. But in terms of a team that made the playoffs last year that missed, I look at the Minnesota Wild, and I'm just not sold on top 6 center Victor Rask. Like, I know he was great next to Kaprizov. But, I mean, obviously Rask isn't the only issue. I have it the Wild. I think they're worse defensively after losing Suter and Soucy. I know they brought in Alex Goligoski and Dmitry Kulikov. which might just be a wash for them. I mean, they got Kaprizov back, which is obviously huge, and he's going to be great again next year. I don't really love their bottom six, though. I feel like their depth is kind of weak. Now, that could change if Marco Rossi and Matt Boldy make the team out of camp. If those guys make it, Wild could definitely be good this year. I also think, I mean, obviously Nashville's an easy pick. I mean, they traded Ryan Ellis, they traded Victor Arvidsson, and they just barely snuck into the playoffs last year anyway. Philip Forsberg and Matthias Ekholm's deals are up at the end of the year. I know they said that they're working on extensions for those guys. I personally think it would be smarter to trade them and just rebuild. And also, I mean, I like the St. Louis Blues depth, but I mean, obviously there's still questions with the Vladimir Tarasenko situation. Their defense on paper isn't the best, in my opinion. And I know Jordan Binnington was great in the playoffs last year, but he didn't have a great regular season. And I don't know if he's a top half of the league starter. So I could see I can actually see all of those three teams missing the playoffs this year. Wild probably had the most upside of anyone. Obviously, they were the most competitive in the first round last year. So, but all three of those teams are teams I'm keeping an eye on for some potential regression.
It was a crazy offseason. I want to actually ask you, I think this is probably the year, it has to be the year that the Avalanche get something. How are they? Year after year, they just keep coming up short. I'm just now worried about their goalie situation.
Yeah,
I don't know if I trust him.
Joe Sakic has been so great as GM with them, but I think he absolutely botched the crap out of handling that goalie situation. You lose Philip Grubauer, who signs with Seattle for 6 years at $5.9 million, and then you trade a first-round pick and Connor Timmins, a pretty good young defenseman, to Arizona for Darcy Kemper, who makes $4.5 million, was significantly worse than Grubauer last season. He was even better than him a couple years before.
I don't trust him.
He was worse last season. He has injury concerns, and he's an unrestricted free agent. So you're going to be in the same spot you were this offseason with Grubauer 1 year later. But yeah, if they let Grubauer go, and the argument was, look, we have such a great team that we don't need a good goalie because we're just not going to give up any good chances, and they spent like $2 million, like a third-round pick to get a goalie to be in a tandem with like Pavel Francouz, I think is going to be healthy this year. I could have understood that logic, but to go out and trade premium assets for a guy who's either going to walk or get a raise, probably to Grubauer's level next summer, that just really confused me. I mean, Colorado's still a great team, obviously. I mean, they lost Ryan Graves, but they got Ryan Murray, who I think will bounce back after a bit of a tough year in New Jersey. Like I said, they have Alex Newhook, who could bolster the top nine, help fill the loss of Brandon Saad. They're still a great team. They're still one of the Cup favorites. We'll see if they can get over the hump this year.
I'll be in Vegas in like 3 weeks. I want to know how good they are.
I mean, you saw them.
It was a weird offseason.
It was a weird offseason, but to be honest with you, I still think Vegas is going to be a really good team. Obviously, they lost out. They without Alex Tuch for the first couple of months of the season, which will hurt. I know that getting Dadonov trade was weird. A lot of people have been.
I hated that move.
I hate it because it's how they allocated the money that they got from losing Fleury. But Dadonov had a very bad season last year in Ottawa.
Very bad.
2 years before that, he's been a consistent 25 goal scorer for Florida. I feel like this is still a good player who just had a bad year on an Ottawa team where he has like no high-end talent to play with outside of Brady Tkachuk. Right now, I feel like he's probably going to be on the third line, but if he gets a chance to play in that top six, maybe something with Riley Smith, who didn't have the best season last year, only 25 points. I think he could be a force for them, especially in the power play. Vegas' power play was very bad last year. Dadonov is a power play beast in Florida. He should definitely help out there for Vegas.
They almost need Nolan Patrick to be pretty good, huh? Because they have some center depth issues as it is.
Yeah, I mean, center is definitely Vegas' weakest position, which is why they were in all the Jack Eichel rumors at the start of the summer, but they literally just don't have any cap space right now. And I mean, even if they were to trade for Eichel, he still needs surgery or whatever. So obviously that's a concern. But I mean, yeah, Nolan Patrick, former number 2 overall pick. He showed flashes in his first 2 NHL seasons, and of course he missed the year with migraine disorder. He was healthy last year, but he just did not play very well for the Flyers last season. He was invisible on most nights, and he got his chances. He was playing with good line mates. He got power play time, all that stuff. He just struggled to produce. So he definitely could be one of those change of scenery guys. Going to Vegas is, I think, a good fit for him, but obviously he needs to produce last year. Only had 9 points last year. He has to be better this season.
Give me some teams that had like a terrible offseason that kind of ruined their chances here. My pick
So-
would be Carolina. I just don't understand anything they did.
I mean, I agree with the terrible offseason part, but not the ruin their chances part. I mean, the top six
Okay,
are still
that's
really
fair.
good.
That's
They're
fair.
still really good on the left side. If their goalies stay healthy, I think they'll be fine. But obviously, that's a big question mark with Frederick Anderson and Antti Raanta. But yeah, it was a weird offseason for the Hurricanes. I mean, it seemed like early on they didn't want to spend any money. First, there was the whole Rod Brindamore saga where they almost didn't extend him, and they almost they didn't let him almost bring his assistants back or whatever. Then they let Dougie Hamilton walk. Then they trade Alex Nedeljkovic, who was a Calder finals last year, because they didn't want to pay him $3
He's
million.
a beast.
And then they spent more money than that, I think, on Anderson, who was like an 8-9 something save percentage last year in Toronto.
And he's never healthy.
Yeah, and exactly. He has injury concerns as well. They traded another restricted free agent, Warren Fogle, to Edmonton for Ethan Bear. That's a trade I actually like. I mean, Bear's a pretty good defenseman. I think he'll help out. But they essentially tried to pull Moneyball. They try to recreate Dougie Hamilton in the aggregate with Ethan Bear and then Tony D'Angelo, who can produce points in the power play and whatnot. But I don't know if he'll be the best fit in that locker room. I don't know if signing him was the best decision. And then obviously the whole Kotkaniemi offer sheet thing. I personally love the pettiness, but then again,
that's
I'm not
funny.
the one making the
It
decision.
was funny.
I'm not the one trading my first round pick this year, so we'll see how that goes for them. Obviously, he's shown some flashes. He had a very good rookie season in 2018-19. Like he put up like legit. His defensive numbers were so good. I remember a lot of analytics people were saying, "Oh, this kid's gonna win a Selke in a couple of years." And obviously, the last 2 years have been much tougher. Spent some time in the AHL in 2019-20. Again, like Patrick, we'll see. Hey, change his scenery. Does that help out with him? I also wonder if he might play wing in Carolina. That could also help out, maybe boost his offensive productivity a little bit. But yeah, Carolina's a weird team. And another team that had a weird offseason, but also one that you could kind of see coming was the New York Rangers. Obviously, they were just totally enamored with the whole Tom Wilson thing and the we need to get grittier and tougher thing. And so they go out and they lose one of their best scorers in Pavel Buchnevich to bring in Stanley
He was
Blais.
huge for me. He was a clutch fantasy guy.
Yeah. I mean, he's a consistent 25-goal, 55-point guy. They traded him for a fourth liner. They traded a third round pick for Ryan Reeves and then extend him. I don't understand. I understand the logic behind trading with him. I don't agree with it. I don't understand the logic behind extending a 34-year-old enforcer on the fourth line before he's even played a game for you guys. They signed Barclay Goodrow to a big contract. I know Goodrow was great on that third line with Tampa Bay. Is he going to be able to replicate that in New York, especially with a much bigger contract? I'm not sure. Patrick Nemeth is another physical guy, but I don't mind that. He's a good third pair guy. He should be fine for them. But the weird thing with the Rangers is, in spite of having a terrible offseason, in spite of me disagreeing with basically every single move they made, they don't look that bad. Like, they have Panarin and Kreider at left wing on their top two lines, Zibanejad and Strome at center. They have Adam Fox and Norris on their defense. Jacob Trouba is probably not bad as a second pair guy. Ryan Lindgren's sturdy. K'Andre Miller is going to get better. They have got young guys like Kakko and Kravtsov and Lafreniere and Nils Lundqvist and a ton of guys like that. And their goalie tandem is pretty good too. It doesn't make sense for me to say that the Rangers should be better when they made so many terrible moves this offseason. But like, I think they could challenge for a playoff spot. I think in any other division, honestly, they may even like be close to a lock. But the Metro is so deep that
they would have made the playoffs last year, right? In like almost any other division. No,
I think they would have made it maybe in the North. They may have finished above Montreal, but
yeah, that's what I thought they did.
I mean, they might have, but I mean, that's not that big of an accomplishment. I mean, the Flyers won more games than the Canadiens last year, for crying out loud. We talked about
it's a Stanley Cup team, though.
I know. I mean, you gotta get to the playoffs to reach the Stanley Cup first, and that's the risk you run with only winning 25 out of 56 games or whatever.
Last year on my fantasy team, I was terrible at picking defensemen, other than Darnell Nurse. Give me like a young defenseman that is on the rise that I should maybe focus on.
Oh, that's a good one. Okay, so two guys come to mind right off the top of my head. The first is Jamie Drysdale in Anaheim. Now, he had a very difficult rookie season. He was not great for them last year, but obviously a former top 5 pick, I believe, has plenty of puck skills for them. I mean, Anaheim's defense is probably the strongest part of their team. So if they put him into like a cushy spot where he can kind of just produce, face easy competition, third pair guy who's heavily sheltered, gets on the power play and whatnot, he could be someone who's solid. Evan Bouchard should receive a bigger role in Edmonton with them shipping out Ethan Bear. I mean, that depends on, I guess, where they put Cody Ceci. And, I mean, the power play time with him is limited because they have Nurse and Tyson Berry. So I don't know if he'll get a ton of points. If you're looking for someone who will get power play time, I would definitely keep an eye on either Adam Boquist or Jake Bean in Columbus. Obviously, Zach Werenski's still there, but they've traded Seth Jones. Boquist was a pretty good guy last year for Chicago. He put up some points. And Jake Bean, former AHL Defenseman of the Year in Carolina system, he's always been long regarded as a future top 4 offensive defenseman. So one of those two guys, I think, could definitely be productive. Also, Noah Dobson in New York. I don't know if they would put him on their second pair because it would probably mean playing with Scott Mayfield. And most coaches don't like going with 2 righties on the same pair, but he's another young guy who can move the puck and skate and could get some power play time as well.
Do we think Chicago can be any better this year? I know they paid a premium for Seth Jones, but that DeBrincat was awesome last year.
Not only do I think Chicago will make the playoffs this year, I think they're closer to being a really good team than a bad team. They're missing the playoffs or being like they were last year. Seth Jones may not be as good as some people think he is. I know the analytics community is definitely kind of at odds with him, but I definitely think he's. I mean, a couple of years ago, he had a legitimately like Norris like caliber season. He's like 4th in voting. When he's playing his best hockey, absolutely, he can definitely be a top pair guy, no doubt about it. Jake McCabe was low-key very good for Buffalo last year at the start of the season. Like I was talking about how bad Rasmus Ristolainen's underlying numbers have been over the course of his entire career. They were great alongside Jake McCabe for like the first 12 games of last year. Then McCabe, I think, broke his leg or something terrible happened to him like that, and he missed the rest of the year with injury. So if he's back to full health, those two guys should really help stabilize Chicago's defense. Goaltending was obviously the huge question for the Blackhawks coming in last year. Kevin Lankinen emerged as a quality option. You go out and get the reigning Vezina winner and Marc-Andre Fleury for essentially a bag of chips. And you had Tyler Johnson, who's like a decent depth guy. And you got a 2nd-round pick in that trade as well. Johnson obviously isn't the player he once was in Tampa Bay when he led them in scoring, whatever. They went to the final in 2015 or something close to that. But I look at Chicago. I see a pretty deep forward core, especially in the top 9. The defense looks solid. The goalie tandem looks great. I think they'll be a playoff team this year.
Okay.
As I hate to say it.
Give me I don't know. Do you want to do like a division preview, like predictions here? So Atlantic, who do you got here? Like who would be your pick right now?
Okay. To win the division, you just want like playoff teams coming from them?
Division, just to win the division.
Okay. So I'm just going regular season, by the way. Tampa Bay is probably still the best team in this division, but I mean it's hockey. It's a weird sport. Weird things happen. So I'm actually going to go with the Boston Bruins here. I know they're kind of shifting cores. They obviously lose Krejci and Tuukka Rask in the offseason. I guess Rask could still maybe come back midway through the year. He's a torn labrum right now and is a free agent, so maybe he comes back. But even if he doesn't, I like the goalie tandem. I'm a big Linus Ullmark fan. I think he'll be solid for them last year. I mean, the guy was pretty decent in Buffalo last year, had like a .917 save percentage, again, on Buffalo. So
you would trust him going into this year?
Yeah, I mean, you move that out, you translate that to Boston, that's probably like a .945. I know his goals saved above expected wasn't that great last year, actually, but I kind of think that's probably more like public models, like missing stuff, because, I mean, Buffalo's defense is such a tire fire. It's tough for probably any public model to account for just how bad it was. Also, Jeremy Swayman, the backup, was great for them last year, albeit in a very small sample size.
It was.
They'll have a full year Taylor Hall this year. They'll have a full year Mike Riley. Their defense was always going to be brutal last year, and it was phenomenal. And they went out and supplemented it by adding Riley at the trade deadline from Ottawa. He was a nice fit. So, like I said, they'll have a full year Taylor Hall. It stinks that Krejci won't be back because Hall, Krejci, Smith was such a great line for them last year.
It was.
If the Bruins are going to be good, they need Charlie Coyle to take a step up. He had a horrible season last year. But he's shown before that he can be a very solid middle six center, both with Boston and also Minnesota. He's a solid player, I think, but he needs to rebound big time this year. If he can be solid for them, and second line center isn't an issue, I think the Bruins will be just fine. But otherwise, they might have to go out and make a
So you think I should be optimistic this year about a good Bruins team? I mean, I didn't really see much of an improvement other than, I don't know, Eric Hollis, whatever, and
I mean,
Nick Foligno.
I'm not a big fan of the Foligno contract, but the player's still not bad. And obviously those guys on with Tomas Nosek improve their depth and whatnot. I mean, it's more me just like trusting the guys who are coming back, like McAvoy up to the perfection line. Craig Smith was pretty solid in his first year there. They gave Brandon Carlo a big extension. I know that. So it's more me being a fan of the guys that Boston has and the guys they brought in, other than the goalie. But as much as I hate to say it, I don't think the Boston Bruins are going to fall off a cliff this year.
Okay. I like that. All right, Metropolitan, what do we got here?
So originally I did have Pittsburgh, but I made these projections way back.
Really?
But I made this projection way back before I knew Crosby and Malkin were going to miss such significant time. I'm going to go with all my playoff teams here just because I feel like I really need to reorder things because my number 2 team is the Flyers, and then I find out that Kevin Hayes is going to miss 6 to 8 weeks, and Wade Allison's out indefinitely with a high ankle sprain. Now I got to reconsider that and whatnot. I mean, I just refuse to bet against the New York Islanders. I have them in third, making the playoffs, just because they always find a way, right? They're just a cockroach. They'll find a
They are
very trash
unbelievable.
Something. They'll win every single game this year, 2-1 probably. So we'll see.
It's the Emma Brown effect.
Yes, yeah, and then I have Carolina behind them, just because I didn't like Carolina's offseason, and I'm concerned about the health potentially of their goalie tandem. But the top 6 is still great. The left side on defense is still great. There's still a lot to like about that team. So I think they'll be solid. I originally have Washington missing the playoffs this year just because they're getting really old and they literally did nothing this offseason to get better. But now with Crosby and Malkin being out to start the year, I kind of got to recalibrate everything. And same thing with Hayes being out for the start of the year in Philly. So I got to kind of rethink my Metro predictions. That division, I got to make some changes to from when I predicted way back in like August or something right after free agency.
All right, so Western Conference and the Central. That almost looks like Colorado and then Dallas to me.
Yeah, I actually have the order flipped, and this again is probably like the same.
The
same thing I'm going with in the Atlantic, where Colorado's the better team than Dallas. I mean, they just are. But it's a weird sport. Things happen. Teams rarely win the divisions back-to-back years, I feel like. I mean, even look at Tampa Bay last year. I know they didn't have Kucherov last year, but they were third in the Atlantic. And even the year before, or the Central last year. And even the year they won their first cup with this core, they were second in the Atlantic that year behind Boston. So the best team doesn't always wind up with the best record in the regular season. That's kind of just how it goes. So I'm kind of projecting that out. Like I said, I talked about how much I like Dallas earlier. So I've got them being in first right there. So
the Blues bore me to death. I don't know what it is. They just bore me to death.
I mean, their depth looks really good this year up front. I'm really skeptical about their defense. And obviously, Bennington needs to be really good for them. He needs to be playoff Bennington for them to be really good this year.
Yeah. All right, last little division here.
The
Pacific.
I mean, the chalk pick is Vegas here. I just don't really think there's another team on their level. Honestly, I see everyone picking Edmonton to be second in that division. And I do have Edmonton second, so I guess I can't disagree with them. But
that was so disappointing last year.
Yes, they were obviously not good in the playoffs, but man, that defense. Again, I talked about Ottawa having Thomas Chabot and a bunch of kids in a trench coat. It's kind of the same thing in Edmonton, other than maybe obviously if Bouchard takes a big step forward, then he can change that. But I mean, Tyson Barrie is about as one-dimensional as it gets. Duncan Keith is really getting up there in age. I don't like how they handled that trade. Not necessarily. I mean, bringing in Duncan Keith isn't the worst idea, but the fact that they couldn't get Chicago to retain Fouts, team up a useful young defenseman, Caleb Jones, Seth's brother, by the way, confuses me. And then the Cody Ceci contract. What are you doing? Like, I know he was good last year in Pittsburgh. I get that. But, I mean, the previous 4 years or whatever with Ottawa and Toronto, he was very not good. And you already had a good second pair defenseman in Ethan Bear, right-handed young guy, cost-controlled. I just don't see the need to move that. I would have rather them kept Bear and used the money they spent on Warren Fogle to get like a Brandon Saad or somebody. Like, what do you?
Gavin did the preview on the Sharks too. God, I'm getting a little worried about them. Like, how many more years are they going to keep trying?
I don't even know. I definitely think they should probably say goodbye to Doug Wilson at this point. I mean, he had a great run. They had a great run, but it's over. I mean, it's it feels so over. I mean, Burns, Carlson, Vlasic, they just aren't the players they once were. They're getting paid all the money. I mean, Logan Couture, even he isn't as good as he once was.
No.
Still solid player. Still a solid player, but not. I wouldn't say he's like a legitimate first line center anymore. If he is, just like a low end first line center. Now that's partially offset by Tomas Hertl. Tomas Hertl was great for them last year, but I believe he's also. I think he's a free agent at the end of the year. So they should probably either look into trading. I think they should look into trading him actually, because I'm pretty sure he said, or there was a rumor that he isn't willing to sign an extension right now. And if that's the case, yeah, he's a UFA at season's end. You could get a ton for him from somebody like the Boston Bruins, for example. So I definitely think moving on from him would be a good decision. Is it a decision that I trust Doug Wilson to make? No, but we'll see if he does it.
What kind of season are we getting out of the Kraken?
I think they're going to be right there on the playoff bubble. I mean, you look at Seattle. Obviously, the big weakness is high-end forward talent, especially at center, which makes sense. I talked about that. I wrote the Seattle Kraken preview. And it just makes sense for center to be an expansion team's weakest position just because teams value centers higher than wingers, and you get to protect a large percentage of your forward core than your defense. So it makes sense that be weak down the middle, especially with Yanni Gourde out to start the year with shoulder surgery. But they're really good on wing. I like all their wingers. I think they have a bunch of really good second-line guys and whatnot there who will produce. And that's kind of Vegas had in their inaugural year with guys like David Perron and James Neal. And obviously Marchessault and Smith, who are still there. Seattle's defense looks legit. I mean, they're going to be really hard to score on this year. The one concern I might have is if they have enough guys who can move the puck. Right now, just looking at their projected roster, you've got Jacob Larson, Jamie Alexiak, Kirsten Seuss, Hayden Fleury, or Jeremy Lewis. On all four who probably fall into the defensive bracket. I know Alexiak, especially his underlying numbers, were really good last year in Dallas. We'll find out how much of that was playing with Miro Heiskanen this year. But the defense looks really solid for them. Goaltending is obviously going to be phenomenal with Grubauer and Drieger, even if Drieger takes a bit of a step back. I think they're going to be a really hard team to score on. Offense is obviously going to be a concern for them. I do have them in playoffs right now. I don't think it's a lock or anything like that. I don't think San Jose or Anaheim are going to be close to the playoffs this year. I think it's really a four-way heat between LA, Seattle, Vancouver, Calgary to go for that third playoff spot and maybe a wild card or maybe even another divisional spot if Edmonton falls off. So I do have Seattle making the playoffs this year. I don't think it's a lock, but I think it's definitely a realistic goal for them in this first year.
And who would your cup pick be right now?
It's a good question. Obviously, it's so early. It's so hard to pick. I currently have I have my full playoff bracket. I predicted, like I said, I need to change probably my Metropolitan Division standings around because of some of the injury stuff that's come up there with a couple of those teams. I currently have Vegas winning the cup. I think their forward core is super deep. I mean, the one question I have with Vegas is how are they going to get cap compliant when Alex Tuck comes off of LTIR? So we'll see about that. But assuming they can somehow maneuver through that just fine. I mean, the depth is there. They have some high-end guys on the wing. Obviously, the big question is, can you win a cup without a truly elite first-line center? I think Vegas doesn't have one of those guys right now. William Karlsson is the closest thing to it. And he's good, but he's not as good as like a Braden Point or Ryan O'Reilly or Nicholas Backstrom or any of the first-line centers of recent cup winners. But their depth is good. They've got guys who can score on the wing. Mark Stone deserves to win a Selke.
I love that guy.
Right now. Hopefully he gets it this year. He was great for them. Had the best season of his career last year as their captain. And the shutdown performance he put on, and Vegas as a team put on against Nathan McKinnon in the second round against Colorado, was just a thing of beauty. They bring Alex Martinez back. The defense still looks solid, especially if young guys like Nick Hagan, Zach Whitecloud continue to grow.
Puck blocking machine right there.
Yes, sir. I'm a believer in Robin Leonard. I think he's a really good goalie. Laurent Brossoit, too. I think he's a capable backup. Obviously not as good as tandem with Fleury Leonard, but I think it's more than good enough to get Vegas back to the playoffs and great position and go on a deep run.
Maybe I'll be their good luck charm.
Home win the cup. Maybe. We'll have to see.
How about the East? Coming out of the East.
Okay, coming out of the East. You're really going to like this. I actually have Boston coming out of the East.
Wow.
I just think they're a team. I think, those Hala, Nosek, Foligno, and forward additions remind me of? they remind me of some of the moves Montreal made last offseason with getting Josh Anderson and getting Joel Edmondson and being a more physical and harder team to play against. And Boston has a way better foundation than the Canadiens did when they were making those moves. So I think the Bruins are going to be a really good team this year and go on a deep playoff run.
I think the Canadiens are going to completely crash and burn.
I definitely could see that. I mean, I have them missing the playoffs. I don't have them completely crashing and burning, but I mean, they lost. You could argue they lost the two most important skaters of their playoff run last year in Danault and Weber.
Yeah. I think the Caulfield kid is awesome, but
oh yeah, he's great. And man, the only thing I don't like about Cole Caulfield is every single time he scores, I have to see my Twitter timeline being like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe the Flyers passed on this guy twice technically because they had the 11th pick and then they traded down to 14." And I think this is someone who loves Cam York and think he's going to be a really good player, but yeah.
And you get to watch Suzuki. Right, there you go.
Oh yeah, the person of my most regrettable tweet of all time.
Yep.
Fun.
Yep. There you go.
Who torched the Flyers in that playoff series. Thank God they won that playoff series because if they had lost, it probably would have been because of Suzuki almost single-handedly, and I would probably still be curled up in the fetal position right now or something. So.
All right, give me like one bold prediction to close out the show. One thing nobody's really talking about, but this is going to be Andrew's take on the year.
Okay, this is that's a good one. Oh, okay, I have the perfect one. You know who I think is going to go on a really deep playoff run and be a really good team this year? And I don't think they're going to win the cup. I have them going to the third round right now. The Winnipeg Jets. I think they're going to be.
Oh.
You look at the forward core has always been able to score, no doubt about it. And Connor Hellebuyck is one of the best goalies in hockey. The only thing that's been holding them back is that they have had arguably the worst defense in hockey. It's only one of the worst defenses in hockey over the last couple seasons. So they make two moves I really like. They get Nate Schmidt and they get Brendan Dillon from Vancouver and Washington. Schmidt had a tough season last year with Vancouver, but before that he was great in Vegas. Top four guy, no doubt about it. Can move the puck and can play high in the lineup. Dillon's a very solid defenseman. I think he could mesh really, really well with Neil Pionk. You factor in the growth of a young guy like Logan Stanley or something like that. Billy Hinola comes up and makes an impact. I think they're going to be much better on defense, especially if those acquisitions allow them to kind of lessen Josh Morrissey's responsibility and get him back to the level he was when he was playing with Jacob Trouba when they were a great team in 2018 and 2019. So I think the Winnipeg Jets are going to be a really good team this year. I really like their top nine. Defensive depth, I think, is phenomenal. And obviously, Connor Hellebuyck is probably either the best or second best goalie in the league. He's right neck and neck with Andre Vasilevskiy.
All right. That's our guy, Andrew McGinnis. Hopefully he does the hockey show with us. I haven't gotten a confirmation yet.
I don't know if I can do it this Wednesday because I have 2 exams, but
every once in a while if you pop in.
I'm sure I will be.
All right. That's our guy. Make sure to follow him _Andrew MCG on Twitter. We'll have Sophie pop that in. Plumber Courtney. Make sure to follow her. Everything she does behind the scenes. Myself, Trey Dalbert. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.